So this post is fun for a couple of reasons. One,
What is the name of this post?
Priming and Contamination.
Thank you.
As I said a few minutes ago.
I know, but that was so long ago, we probably forgot.
Our astute listeners will have remembered. Anyway, this was on the I forget when this came out, 2007, 8. Yeah. So like the state of the research at the time was, and this, I mean, I was taught this all the way through college, that, if you suggest people, whether it's like spin the wheel, and it's fixed to land on like somewhere in the teens or somewhere in the 60s, then ask them to guess the number of countries in Africa that are part of the United Nations. Their number will correlate with the number that landed on the wheel.
Or be a higher or lower number.
Yeah. If you ask them their zip code and then ask them how many practicing physicians there are in California, those numbers will correlate. Whereas if you ask them in the other order, they don't. I was told all this shit for ages.
I think this is true. You're bringing up the replication crisis, right? I think that had more to do with...
That's more like anchoring.
Well, it was also priming, but that was specifically in like social sciences.
Why are we bringing up the replication crisis for people who have not read this post yet?
Because as the title suggests, it's about priming.
Okay.
Yeah.
And priming?
Priming is the idea that if I were to like say, hey, I'm going to go to that place where I need to go deposit a check. By the way, when I say bank, what does that mean to you? You'd be like, oh, the money thing, not the edge of a river, right? Okay. Whereas if I had said, I'm going to go chase beavers by your house because you sent me a picture of a beaver over the weekend. And then asked you what bank meant, you'd be like, oh, that's the edge of the water, the body of water.
Yeah.
Now that's obviously like not, if it was just me and you, it's not a reliable sample size, but the idea was that this was a big enough effect to where you could get people to connect ideas to other ideas by giving them one idea first.
Yeah. And like the whole bank thing is kind of, just obvious because you're going to be thinking about the context of what you guys are talking about, but this extended to the fact that some studies said that like if you prime people with ideas of oldness, they will start walking slower afterwards.
Right.
Which, I mean, at the time I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Our brains are weird. And then the replication crisis happened, which for people who've listening a while would already know is the fact that a lot of social science studies before about 2014 or so, people just didn't bother to replicate them, and once they started trying to replicate them, they failed to replicate. And
in the meantime, they'd been like writing books about them.
Yeah, about what this means for humans,
including them in discussions where they might be relevant. Yeah,
but like the fact that I have
LessWrong sequences, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. The fact that I have so many examples of priming just from what I remember from 10 years ago suggests to me that they didn't necessarily replicate the exact thing with bank or something, but they did enough similar things across, I'm assuming, decades and different. In fact, another fun thing about this post is that it's cited heavily. So like this wasn't just one person misreading one person's paper or even trusting too much in one person's paper.
Right.
This was like the established consensus for some decades.
Yeah. There was even those things where if you put a cold cup in someone's hand, they're going to act more cold to you, and if you put a warm cup, they'll act warmer to you. And I think my favorite thing that's come out of the replication crisis is one of the best ways to predict if something is going to replicate or not without actually doing a replication is asking a random person on the street, does this sound like crazy bullshit? Not using those exact words, but for things that mostly sound like crazy bullshit, they don't replicate.
or even
things
just
where people are like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Those often will. Even
just ask yourself, does this trick my bullshit-o-meter? Yeah. Now that said, like it's possible to be surprised by results, right? If you had asked me 2 years ago, hey, if there's a flu-like plague going around in 2020, you think vitamin D will have a surprising effect on the impact that it has on a body? I'd be like, no, fuck you, you snake oil salesman. And then lo and behold, it appears to, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing about this too is like, I think it's worth keeping in mind that like I don't blame Eliezer for getting this wrong because it was the established state of science and his goal wasn't to like become an expert.
Yeah, it wasn't his research.
Right.
Like, he's citing other research that seemed to have been peer reviewed and
and I think that even if you're trying to be as right as possible, like it is still a reliable heuristic to say let's trust the expert consensus. And like I'm doing that with the vitamin D thing. I didn't review anything personally, and I'm not equipped to. It would take me a long time to get good enough. And how am I going? Even if I were to review some of the studies that were done, how do I know that they weren't fraudulent? Am I going to conduct my own before I believe anything? Fuck that. Who has the time?
I think we've been talking a lot because we're in the same room and we can see each other. Wes, David, did you guys have things to jump in on at here?
Nah.
So the vitamin D thing is pretty hotly contested.
Yeah.
Somebody's offering like a $100,000 bet that vitamin D cures COVID. And Scott Alexander is definitely on the other side. He said, and he was offering to take that bet with slightly lower terms. 100K was a bit too rich for him. But
cures COVID isn't the claim I heard. I heard that it impacted the severity of the case.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence that it people who have bad cases of COVID are vitamin D deficient.
Right.
There's not a lot of evidence that it's that deficiency that's causing the severity, but it does kind of hint at that. And they haven't really had time to run really good studies on what the causal mechanism is.
Yeah.
Wait, didn't they run a study that where like 100% of the people that they gave vitamin D had no to mild cases?
I don't remember.
I distinctly remember Zvi Moskowitz blog post that said either this is a real effect, it's fraud, or it's incredibly good luck, and no one has luck that incredible. Or I guess incredibly bad luck if it's really is a false positive.
Yeah, or just a bad study.
But then the takeaway to take from this post is that we should wait for that to replicate once or twice. But of course, like, the other thing with this particular example is that a bottle of 300 vitamin D pills is $8.
Yeah, and it's not going to hurt you.
Right. I was already taking it every day for the last few years anyway. And so when I heard this was, sometime over the summer maybe?
Yeah, probably like 6 months ago.
I bought $80 worth of vitamin D pills and gave them to everybody in my family. And I said, take these, please.
I gave them out as stocking stuffers for Christmas.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, if they were, maybe it was over Christmas. Whatever it was sometime, the whole year blended together. But, if vitamin D pills cost $1 each, I would have been more inclined to do more homework or, at least wait for better data or something. But given how cheap it was, this didn't strike me as like if I was being huckstered by snake oil, well, there's probably some marginal benefit to taking vitamin D anyway, and it didn't cost me that much money. So,
well, so talking about the replication crisis, I get really mad that that's what people call it, because it's I call it the bullshit crisis because it is the thing we're referencing is we've discovered that a lot of the entire the psychology community and psychological studies are bullshit. They did them badly with bad information hygiene, poorly designed studies, and didn't use methods that we've known for decades are what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like
a couple of episodes you talked about I think you talked about the post where where it's basically just Eliezer bitching about how rationalization is a really bad term because rationalization is the opposite of rational.
Yeah.
And I feel kind of the same way about the replication crisis. The replications aren't the problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's not that the failure to replicate isn't the problem. The problem is the study was bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's much harder to cite the bullshit crisis in a serious scientific article.
I suppose so.
And I think most people who are talking about it know what it means. I don't think anybody thinks that replication is the problem.
Yeah. I mean,
that's also true of rationalization, though.
Yeah.
But it's
I love the fact that he said it's like calling lying truthalization.
Right.
Truthalization.
Well, they did call it truthiness.
Yes. Stephen Colbert specifically.
He saved the elephant population.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't have much else to offer on this one, other than I think that it's a valuable, the history. I like the fact that it's left up. Maybe if I haven't read it in the Rationality AI to Zombies, maybe there's a disclaimer at the top or bottom that says, by the way, this didn't replicate. If there's not, I would support that. But I do like the idea of leaving it in, because it's like, hey, look, you can be well informed and wrong, and that's a perfectly legit place to be. So
yeah. Likewise, I appreciate people putting their confidence intervals at the top of essays, and the thing Scott Alexander does, where he has posted his retractions just on. I think he still has that on the news site. I don't know, but there was just a menu link that was like a list of all the things I fucked up on.
It would be nice if these
that too.
posts had like a header or something that said, by the way, this failed to replicate.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Brian Dunning of Skeptoid does that every several months, corrections or errors or whatever it was.
Well, especially because, entry into the rationalist community, people are all like, go read the sequences. So, like, this is a 2007 article, but people are definitely still reading it.
I think Eliezer himself is busy doing Miri stuff, but he could probably delegate somebody to do that. Maybe we should email him.
We can email the folks we talked to who run LessWrong and ask them.
Email Rob Bensinger. Didn't he have a big role in doing the AI to zombies?
Yes, but AI to Zombies, I don't know. I haven't read AI to Zombies. I assume it's fixed or noted at least in AI to Zombies.
Maybe.
I have it. I don't remember it.
Okay.
I listened to the audiobook version of AI to Zombies, and they didn't say anything about, by the way. There was no disclaimer in the audio version anyway.
Did they?
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
Did they include this post?
Yeah.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Okay, then. Yeah. Reach out.
I don't remember that, and I'm pretty sure I would have if they'd included it. So, yeah, they probably didn't.
Yeah, I listened to it this morning.
Although, per what Jace just said he likes, I'd say like 70% confidence on that.
Okay. I do want to at least mention that there's still a note of good in here, in useful information, I guess, in here, in that our brains do run in networks, and activating one concept will at least somewhat tangentially activate concepts that are strongly linked to that one, which is, as pointed out in a Scott Alexander on politics recently, a common thing used in politics where you just associate bad things with the other side and good things with your side. And even if they don't have anything to do with each other, eventually in the listeners, an association starts to form between good on our side and bad on their side. And I think that's most of what you see on Twitter nowadays.
I think that, a lot of these, this is the sort of thing that, I couldn't cite a well-done, peer-reviewed study on this, but it sounds like that makes perfect sense to me, and I'm prepared to endorse that.
Well, I mean, it happened just in the recent Scott Alexander article where he's like, Scott Alexander said a good thing about something Charles Murray said, and Charles Murray wrote the bell curve, and the bell curve can be interpreted to be racist, therefore Scott Alexander is racist. And they didn't say that last line, because that would be a lie, but, they let all those associations just go together there in people's heads.
Sure. Yeah, and they knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know that nobody who is evil ever says anything right or good.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and maybe just in the effect of reading that sentence about Scott Alexander, they believe it just in the process of understanding the sentence.
Are you trying to segue?
That does tie us into, do we believe everything we're told? But I don't know if I'm jumping the gun.
Yeah, well, I just I'm trying to find out whether priming as a concept was replication crisis, and I think it is just social priming.
Yeah.
Or behavioral priming.
Yeah.
Having a hard time just finding a clear answer on Google, though.
I know that the behavioral priming definitely failed to replicate. That was the one where, like, putting hot things in people's hands or making them think about old people and they walk slower. Those ended up being just complete crap.
That doesn't surprise me. It's, if you can make people happier just by giving them hand warmers, I might
be happier if I'm cold and someone gives me a hand warmer.
Sure.
That's because I'm not cold anymore.
Right.
I think that one was not replication crisis. The link between temperature and, I don't know, what is it, revealed mood or whether you perceive someone as behaving warm or cold towards you.
I think that's broader than just like, are you holding a warm or cold beverage?
I'd have to...
if I'm freezing, I'm probably annoyed at everything.
I'd have to look into it again, but I actually have remember the wearable that you wanted to get, the Ember? Did you end up getting one of those?
I did not.
Oh, well, I have one. I like it.
I know. I tried it.
What is it?
Back when we could see people.
Back when, other humans existed.
I think you let me try it at Solstice.
Yeah, I let a lot of people try it at Solstice. I probably should be getting some kickback from them for how much I've been marketing. But,
no, I don't know. It convinced me not to get it.
Anyway, what is it?
It's a wristwatch-looking device that you wear on the inside of your wrist, and you can make it warm or cold.
I remember that, yeah.
Does at least change your own internal perception of how warm or cold you are. Okay. For some people, apparently it didn't work for Wes. And they cite some of the other studies about man, what do they call it? Thermal wellness.
Thermal wellness.
Like the one about like the beverages. And they claim that this device could have that same result, which I don't know. Even just saying it out loud just now, I'm like kind of, but I would want to go look that up to see.
So you put it on other people's wrists, and then you control how hot or cold it is, depending on how we want them to feel about other people they're interacting with.
Yeah. I have a very strong prior against anything that is adjective wellness.
Yeah.
Like that's just that just sounds like whoever wrote it or did it or whatever is just trying to soak a bunch of Karens.
Yeah.
Well, that was the wording of the company that sells the Amber. It's like
I'm sure.
They were citing studies that used like real words. But
temperature wellness to me means that like if my body is at rough homeostasis with like the environment, then I'm probably in a better mood than if I'm sweltering or if I'm shivering, right?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is this was invented by students at, I forget if it was MIT or whatever, but there were these students that were working in a really cold lab, and they started trying to figure out something that they could wear to keep themselves warmer, and they came up with the idea of the product there but they all liked this thing, so it was like I like the idea of like the people who made this product and are selling this product also use it themselves and are getting value out of it. Generally a good sign.
Yeah, that's what they say about power bands and shit too, though. Those people wear their $60 power bands.
Yeah, but it's a placebo band.
Yeah,
so they're purchasing a placebo effect, which isn't it's just kind of real.
As long as you're selling a placebo effect, I'm fine with it. If you're selling it to say this will do all this magic to you, then I get annoyed. What's funny about like the solution about I'm cold at work, like I don't know what the temperature control is like there. Maybe it had to be cold. But their solution was like build a $300 watch, not buy a 25-cent hand warmer at Walmart, which is what I do.
I think they were moving around a lot, and there was something where they couldn't have electricity.
These hand warmers last 7-8 hours. You put them in your pocket.
Oh yeah, those things are great,
and they're cheap. Yeah.
Have you seen the ones with
I use fingerless gloves a lot because I don't know, my extremities tend to get cold and I need my fingers for like typing or other things. But like it covers almost all of your hand and it just helps so much.
Oh, I used to have these fingerless gloves that like had the top part of the glove that you could sort of button to the back of it and then flip it forward so it would have the finger parts if you wanted them. Then I lost one of them and I haven't been able to find one that I like as much since.
We are getting way off track.
Yeah, it's all super relevant now.
I tried to shove us into the next post, but you guys were like,
also, I just want to say, if the hand warmers last for 7 or 8 hours and cost 50 cents and the watch costs 300, then getting the watch will you will get ahead eventually. After, let's see, 300 divided by 0.25 times 7, 8,400 hours. So about 30 years of continuous use.
I plan on being immortal, so...
And that's assuming a 7-day work week.
That's 3 years of continuous use. Because 80,000 hours is 40 years.
And that's assuming they need them every day, not just during winter.
Yeah, you're right.
I actually really like it for falling asleep.
Yeah, I'm sure. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's perks. I'm just if your solution was I'm cold at work, I've already got a solution for you, and it's super cheap and it's available at your local Walmart.
Alrighty. I don't know if I should believe you, Stephen. Do I believe everything we're told?
Apparently this one didn't replicate, but this is the kind of thing that I noticed this in my head.
Oh, really?
I don't know if that's because I have heard of this sort of thing before. I don't remember if I learned about it in philosophy class or from LessWrong, but I knew Spinoza was associated with the idea that in order to comprehend a proposition, it basically means that you that you intuitively believe it for the time that it takes you to comprehend what it's saying, and only after the fact do you challenge it and consider it. But maybe it's because I'm also a really gullible person because deception doesn't come isn't something that I don't know. I'm less.
We're a high trust community,
I guess, but to the point where sometimes I feel stupid about it, but I think I'm getting better at it.
It correlates to the high openness trait.
Oh, really? Because I also find myself being ridiculously trusting and gullible to the point that people make fun of me for it often.
I did make fun of you the first time I came over to your house and you were just like, oh, hey, you want to just borrow my car? And I was like, we have literally met for the first time. I could just drive away with it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't.
So the core of this is this following sentence. One might naturally think that on being told a proposition, we would first comprehend what the proposition meant, then consider the proposition, and finally accept or reject it. This obvious seeming method. God damn it!
This
Even
obvious,
infected.
You okay, Inyash?
No.
this obvious seeming model of cognition or cognitive process flow dates back to Descartes, but Descartes' rival Spinoza disagreed. Spinoza suggested that we first passively accept a proposition in the course of comprehending it, and only afterwards actively disbelieve propositions which are rejected by consideration. I wonder if this is one of those things like where some percentage of people don't have the ability to visualize objects.
Yeah.
Like, because this is how my brain works. I've done enough meditation to where when I'd want to, I can notice my thoughts occurring, and I can read something, and then like I believe it for the time it takes me to read it.
Okay.
And I remember I was listening. It was I forget. This was 10 years ago. Like it was Penn Jillette or something on a podcast. Oh no, it was Richard. I don't know. Somebody was talking about Richard Dawkins because Richard Dawkins was born in Kenya.
Oh.
And I think it might have been Penn Jillette joked, yeah, he was born at the same hospital as Barack Obama. And it took me seconds after that to realize that was a joke.
Okay.
Because I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I'd already had in my head somewhere that Barack Obama was born in Kenya because how everything was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember I was like, oh, that's a fun tidbit. And like, hold up a minute. But that took me 5-10 seconds to have that flag fly up. So that's one example that's 10 years old, but I feel like this just happened earlier this week, and I was trying to think of an example, and that's the first one that came to me.
I feel like I don't have that internal experience. Maybe I just...
Yeah, I feel like I don't have that internal experience too.
The post cites like some experiment that maybe confirms this, but I also looked for replication on this one online and found that a replication effort actually found the opposite effect. So at the very least, I would say this is highly contested.
Yeah. Or, yeah, like Steven said, maybe it's just people's brains are different. So some people do this and some don't.
Maybe it depends on what sample you got of people you got in your study. Yeah.
I mean, it's still pointing at something potentially interesting, but I don't think we can actually do anything with it in its current state.
It might also just be a habit that I've ingrained, like when if you're reading stuff and you're trying to be a good a good still manner or whatever, you're like, all right, I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt while I'm reading it. I'm going to try and make this the best case possible. And maybe that's what belief feels like in my brain, is like trying to make this true. But I don't think that's true for. I mean, I don't feel man when I'm reading the instructions on a recipe or something, right? And yeah, like if it's clear that they meant to say 8 teaspoons rather than 8 cups of salt, right? Like I should notice the difference.
I think I message this experience things as neutral. Like sometimes I'll read something and be like, yeah, it seems plausible, but like if somebody were to say, do you definitely believe this is true? I could be like, what I end up saying is, well, I read it in this one book and it was by an author who generally does good at reviewing articles, adding citations, checking their work. So maybe 75%. But that's how I sort of, or I can read something and be like, it seems like bullshit. But then it sort of goes the other way too, where it's something like 75% bullshit because this is this is Deepak Chopra or something.
So
maybe.
So I'm curious, have you guys ever played Two Truths and a Lie?
Yes.
Nope.
When you play that game, do you start from the assumption that things are true and then try to pick out the ones that are wrong? Or do you start from the assumption that they're wrong and try to confirm them?
Wait,
because I definitely come from a standpoint of I start out thinking everything's bullshit, and then I try to figure out which ones are the most plausible.
Huh. For those unfamiliar with this is, I think, often used as an office icebreaker game where, hey, meet the new team. Tell people, stand up, say your name, and tell people 3 things about yourself, 2 of which are true, 1 of which is not.
Okay.
And then people will guess which one isn't true.
The more fun versions of drinking
all
game.
True, and then try and spot the false.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
It's quite good for first dates, by the way.
Cool. Life hack.
If you like your first dates like you like meeting your office coworkers. Anyway.
So basically this is another one of those this seems to fail to replicate, so there's not much to really address in the article.
I want to point out that Gilbert Taffaroti in Malone's paper was entitled "You Can't Not Believe Everything You Read,"
Okay, it's a good name.
which also as the title of the paper, which you are reading, is also funny.
Yeah. The post does end with "this suggests that we should be more careful when we expose ourselves to unreliable information, especially when we're doing something else at the time, because part of the experiment was distracting people while they were told false things." I get this. I just wanted to talk about this really briefly, because this seems to be a thing that comes up a lot, that the more you're exposed to something, the more you become willing to accept it. And this just seems to happen in the real world. Even when we're not talking about this, you automatically believe things when you're initially told them. Even if you disbelieve things at first, it seems like the more something's repeated to you, the more you believe it, which is why things like the QAnon conspiracy can ensnare people, right?
Right.
I do think that, there's definitely a tendency for, I think is that confirmation bias?
Availability heuristic is another good example. Like when
social proof or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's associated with a bunch of other heuristics and biases, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and here's an adjacent example. Like when you look at or Jace too, you might actually know if you're looking at the moonrise and it looks really big on the horizon.
Yeah.
Do you know why that is?
Yeah, because it's close to other things that you can use for comparison.
I don't.
Oh, okay. So
I read it at one point and I forgot.
Well, so I think Enosh is right. But the commonly accepted wisdom is that it's like a magnification from the atmosphere, from hitting more atmosphere.
Oh, I think there's enough atmosphere to make a difference.
Well, and as it turns out, that's just not the case. But people, this was like a thing that I remember learning about 10 years ago, and I learned about the magnification thing 5 years before that, and 10 years later, or 5 years later, they're saying, we correct people's belief on this, and yet in the act of informing them about hey, here's this thing, and here's the way that it's not true, here's the actual fact. If you ask people, sometimes they'll just remember the thing that you told them first after the fact, even though it wasn't true.
Yeah.
And so that might just be an availability thing, an attention thing, or something, right?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of other explanations, like authority. Man,
I've heard you can test the moon thing. Just put your thumb out.
Exactly.
And see how much of it covers. And no matter where in the sky it is, it'll always cover the same amount.
And I'll be honest, when I first did that, to test it,
it
blew my fucking mind.
Oh, really?
Because it looks huge when it's first coming up over the horizon.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, it's about the size of my thumbnail. And then you give it a few hours. You're like, no way.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
We're in a simulation.
We're empiricists. That's the other virtue here.
Okay.
Anyway, so you linked to a thing that found the opposite effect of people who believed things in the act of comprehending them. Can you summarize that link?
Oh, basically just that it found the exact opposite of what was linked in this post. That people tended to be more like the Descartes, at least the people in their sample tended to be much more like the Descartes sample thinking than the Spinoza thinking. Yeah, that's why I said it's certainly not something that seems to have been confirmed.